to the Make or Break Fantasy Podcast. I'm Phil. I'll be your host. I'm joined with Sam and Anthony. Sam, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello. Obviously, I'm Sam. A little bit about me. I've been playing fantasy football for about 13 years, 14 years now. My first ever fantasy football season was when I auto drafted Marshall Falk and Isaac Bruce from the Dream Team, and I was hooked ever since. I loved it so much, and I can't get enough of it every season. So nice to meet you all.
Awesome. Anthony?
I'm Anthony. I've been playing fantasy football for 15 years now, I think. And the very first player I drafted was LaDainian Tomlinson. So got real lucky with that one.
Great. Well, again, I'm Phil. I'll be your host throughout this fantasy podcast. Also, I put out a bunch of content on our website, Make or Break Fantasy. I believe it's at Wix. So it's .wix.com. In addition, I recent fantasy more analyst, I guess. I have our Twitter account as well, which I answer any questions that you may have. I have been doing fantasy for probably about as long as Sam, I would say at this point. My first player again, LaDainian Tomlinson that year. I believe also the first league I won was with Steven Jackson's first year in Atlanta. So been a while, but yeah, it's definitely been a fun ride. So hopefully we can do some things here to help you guys out. So the first thing I wanted to talk about today was drafting. As everyone knows, drafting is kind of the crux of if you're going to have a successful fantasy season or not. So the first thing, definitely draft strategy, very important part. So Anthony, what would you say is has been your draft approach coming into each season?
It all starts about where you're drafting. If you're in a 10-team league and you're drafting 10th, or if you're in a 14-team league like we currently are and you're drafting 5th, your strategy is going to vary based on your draft position. And generally speaking, with my first round pick, I try to get the best value possible. So I take the best player available, and then that kind of sets the tone for my strategy going forward. Whether or not I load up on running backs or go no running backs, it all depends on that first pick, and that all depends on where you're situated in the first round.
Dan, what do you think about that?
Makes sense. I mean, obviously, you got to take the best player available 99% of the time. I mean, you want to try to come up with some sort of idea going into it, though. I only play PPR leagues, so naturally speaking, the value on the receivers are similar to the running backs these days. But currently this year, the running backs are super thin, I think, especially at the top. So my approach this year, I want to definitely try and get one of the top running backs going into it, and then follow up with a couple wide receivers, finish out a strong roster. In the past, I toyed around with taking quarterbacks a little early, trying to get one of the best ones, but the difference in points are never worth it compared to switching out or getting an early pick on a running back or wide receiver. I've decided this year that I'm not going to take a quarterback till one of the last rounds. Figure that's safer, easier to try and stack my lineup, because I am the most unlucky player in the world. I will have 3 injuries at least on my lineup. So, yeah, that's my goal. Take a running back first and then fill it up with some studly wide receivers.
Definitely. I think this year is definitely one of the more stacked crops in terms of quarterbacks. I mean, the last couple of years has been pretty strong, at least in that regard. Me personally, I think, I definitely subscribe to the take the best player available, at least in early rounds. Rounds 1 and round 2, generally you're able to, that's going to be the core of your team. I mean, rankings aside, it's always tough to, I guess, draft 3, 4, 5 of the same position in a row. I definitely do not subscribe to the 0 RB strategy, just because, I mean, if there's a running back sitting there that's good, great value, why would you ever pass on that? It doesn't make any sense. So there is some, I guess, credence to it. I mean, some people tend to waver that way, but personally, I'm more so of the take best player available. I was actually telling Sam about this the other day, but I have like how everyone has a type, like in women, like, oh, you like brunettes or blondes or whatever. I definitely have a type in drafting. So I generally tend to look at, players that are suspended early in the year that you can get at a lower draft price. So this year, Ezekiel Elliott is definitely a player that I like a lot. But, again, like you said, in a 14-team league, taking him at the 1-2 turn, which I have, is going to be a tough pass for me. So at this point, I'm still not sure, but I mean, I have him ranked significantly lower than that. But at my draft position, I'll never touch him. So that's kind of how I look at it. Has I guess the way the draft set up this year, or like the way that there's kind of like those big five right now, changed anything for you guys?
From this year to last year, or last year
Yeah.
to this year?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the big three wide receivers are the exact same. Odell, Julio, and Antonio Brown. They're going to have to go in the top 5 at least. And last year it was kind of similar. David Johnson. I know Bell was suspended last year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's why he fell out. So, I mean, 4 of those top 5 are the exact same. I think it's a no-brainer. Those first 5 picks, you got to take one of them. So, I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, I think they're going to be really consistent, all 5 of them, between Johnson, Bell, Brown, Julio, and Beckham. So, can't go wrong with any.
I really don't understand why AJ Green is not kind of thrown into that mix as well. He's been, super consistent over the last couple of years, and nothing looks to change this year.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I mean, I could see. I think Zeke is falling. Personally, I mean, he fell out of that top 6, which is now why it's like a top 5. But personally, in my opinion on that is I mean, he already has appealed the suspension. And if you look back on league track history, I mean, they've reduced most suspensions. I mean, you look at they were willing to reduce Brady's, and that was, a quote unquote cheating. Le'Veon Bell, which a pretty flat out suspension. Like it was pretty much laid out exactly what he should have been suspended for and how long. You got to reduce from 4 games to 3. So I mean, I think if that goes from 6 games to 4 games, he could be back into the first round. That being said, this year I don't think my draft strategy has really changed that much, just because I think it's fairly standard what you're picking, like if in a 10-team league, 1 through 10. In a 14-team league, I think there's a little flexibility, but I think it's still pretty standard, kind of best available, and then build your team there. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about on the strategy side. But from the top 5, like looking at those top 5 guys. So, looking at 2016, you had Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, Beckham, David Johnson, Gurley, and then AJ Green. Now this year you have David Johnson, Bell, Brown, Julio, and Beckham. So a lot of names that are still kind of in that group. But looking at, I guess, bias aside, with obviously 2020 hindsight with Gurley and how that all played out. But which if you guys had to say, which group would you say you feel stronger?
They're so similar. It's pretty much all the exact same names. So, I mean, I couldn't pick one or the other, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, I think you, like Sam was saying, it's almost the exact same group of guys. So you're going to have a really hard time distinguishing, having one different. I'd say maybe this year's a little bit stronger just because Bell is such a difference maker, and with him not being suspended, maybe it's this year, but not by much.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think just having Bell in there is a pretty huge difference maker. But I guess if you kind of lengthen that out to like the entire first round, what would you guys say?
I like this year's. I feel like you get a lot of value through the first couple tiers of players. I feel like there's a huge cutoff afterwards for this year that I didn't necessarily see last year. I thought there was a lot of value deep in the second round, early third round last year, and this year I feel like it falls off a lot. So I'm excited about the first round this year. It's definitely going to be big names that are going to carry your team, I think, and you're going to find pieces to put it together down the road or down later in the draft too. But I think the first round pick is going to be huge and very crucial for fantasy owners this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think you have a little bit more understanding of, what some of the younger guys are going to do this year, but the incoming class of rookies has the potential to, play a big role in a lot of offenses, and it's with that unknown, it's really hard to say.
Yeah, I think last year I liked the back end of the first round a little bit more. I mean, looking at like a 12 team league on average, I don't know. When looking at the group, I felt more comfortable than this year. I mean, right now, I would say those middle picks are like Michael Thomas, T.Y. Hilton, like guys like that. And I mean, they're not bad players. They're also all very special, excellent players. But like, if I'm, kind of deciding between, T.Y. Hilton and I don't know, I can't even think of another good example, but T.Y. Hilton, I mean, I don't know if I feel totally comfortable with him as my first round pick. And I think in like a 12 team league, there's a good potential that, I mean, depending on the rankings you go by, that a lot of people have him there. I just don't know if I feel good about that. So, I guess, with the kind of on that same piece of like draft position, sleepers and busts. You guys think of, 3 sleepers, 3 busts that, you think everyone should know for this year?
Sure, I'll start. I think Bilal Powell is extremely underrated. I know Matt Forte is still in New York, but that guy's old. He's gonna step on a blade of grass, break his ankle. I don't know what's gonna happen, but he's not gonna be in the lineup for very long this year. And especially in PPR leagues, that guy was an animal last year. Even though Matt Forte was taking so many of the early touches and the early snaps and some third downs, Powell was still producing. And, in New York, they like to run the football. And, I think they're going to phase Forte out this year significantly. And Powell, he's not super underrated. I think he's like 19 or 20 ranked running back, but I think he has potential to produce top 12, top 10 even, especially if, Forte is nowhere to be found. He's going to be an every down running back. So that's my first one. I think Coleman in Cleveland is another one. He's ranked
Corey Coleman.
Yeah, Corey Coleman. He's ranked super low, like 45, 50-ish. And, last year with Pryor, he was still producing. I know Coleman got hurt. He was out for, I think, 8 games or whatever it was, but he still came back. He still made plays. His rookie year, now it's his second year coming back. I don't see why he's not going to get significant touches. I know with Kenny Britt coming over to Cleveland, it's all like, oh, Kenny Britt's going to be great this year. Look at Pryor last year. But, Kenny Britt was good for maybe one season. The guy's bounced around so many teams. And, I don't think he's a big enough playmaker or difference maker that's going to, have him be the sole target in Cleveland. So I think Coleman's going to play a huge role, and he's going to be a really good value for late in the draft, especially if he does blow up and take over that number 1 spot. He's going to be the guy getting the targets. My last sleeper is Jeremy Maclin. If you've looked at Baltimore, watched them play, you know that they're old school, hard-nosed football. They don't throw the ball a ton unless they're losing, but they like to grind it out, right? But the one thing that's always very consistent about Joe Flacco is that he picks one receiver and he goes to town on them. He throws the ball to them so much, they get so many targets, and I think that guy is going to be Jeremy Maclin. So I think he's going to have huge value this year. He's going to take over like the old Steve Smith role, and he's 30 years younger, and he's going to be making plays. He's going to score, probably 5 to 7 deep ball touchdowns this year, and he's going to get a ton of targets. So I think he's going to be a good value pick too.
I'm a little bit different minded when it comes to sleepers, because I don't feel like in today's fantasy game with so much coverage going on that there really are sleepers anymore. But I'll kind of go along the lines of guys that I think are, I guess, undervalued for what they're doing. And I'm going to start with, Larry Fitzgerald. Year after year, he continues to, reach and exceed that 80 catch per year area. And, if he gets 6 or 7 touchdowns, you're looking at maybe 1,000 yards. It's pretty good production from the guy who's being drafted at wide receiver 30-ish. Another guy that I like is Stephon Diggs. He had a down year last year, but he showed in a partial season in 2015 that he could put up huge numbers, and the NFC North is not, a defensively stout division in football. So I think he could, provide a lot of value at that same wide receiver 30-ish area. And one other one that I like, I'm going to go with the quarterback here, is Marcus Mariota. He had a real big year before he got hurt. You're looking at probably the 10th quarterback being taken. And when you talk about a lot of guys avoiding quarterbacks until the late rounds, that you're looking at maybe the 13th round, 14th round, being able to get a guy who has, some explosion in his legs and some new targets to throw to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm like hot and cold on Mariota because as good as he was in that stretch where like he was basically the highest scorer in fantasy by far, he was also playing against the league worst defenses. I mean, in that stretch, I believe it was like something crazy. Like if you averaged like all the defenses of every other player that played in that stretch, other than obviously anyone on Tennessee, is the easiest stretch. But yeah, I see what you're saying. But I guess for mine, I would say my first sleeper that I would put up there would be Willie Snead. I think with the loss of Cooks, there's going to be a lot of targets that go around, and everyone's kind of assuming Michael Thomas is going to be the guy to eat up most of those. But everyone forgets Willie Snead was a monster in the first 3 weeks last year. Before he I believe he tweaked his ankle. So I think he really could have a lock on that wide receiver 2 in I guess the Saints offense. And then also, if you look at it, I believe it's like on average, the second wide receiver in New Orleans is, generally scoring about 10 or 7 touchdowns. So, I mean, if you could get 7 touchdowns, maybe 900 to 1,100 yards, I would say that's a pretty solid value for a guy that's going, after the 5th round. So, not too bad. The second person I would say, could really be a difference maker on your fantasy team is Kareem Hunt. I think he's probably ADP, anywhere between 75 to like 85, 90. So a guy that, you can probably get around the 8th round. He's not the starter right now, but, all signs point to the fact that they feel he could be the next Jamal Charles out in Kansas City. So I don't know if he'll be quite at Jamal Charles level, but he could definitely be a difference maker. He has explosion that Marcus or that Ware just doesn't have right now. The last guy I had, which I was kind of looking at these before the Watkins trade, was Cooper Kupp. He was pretty much in line to be the number 1 in St. Louis before that, or not St. Louis, LA before that that trade. But I still think Cooper Kupp could have some value, late in a draft PPR, because he's going to be that guy running, those short routes. He's definitely, taken on kind of that role, as well as, building that chemistry with Goff to that point or this point in the off season. And, really looks to, I believe he had, 4 catches for 30 yards or something, or maybe 3 catches for 40 the other night. I think he could really expand that offense. Kind of on the bus side, the first one I have been not a fan of all offseason is Marshawn Lynch. Um, generally taking a year off is not a huge positive for any player, let alone a running back who's north of 30. Marshawn Lynch could easily outperform what I guess the Raiders running backs did inside the 20 last year. But from the standpoint of getting the middle of the field, I just don't know how much Lynch is going or how effective he's going to be. Raiders do have a very strong offensive line, but I mean, I don't know if he's going to have that same explosiveness they had in Seattle. Um, Alshon Jeffrey is another one. Anybody who has those soft tissue injuries constantly, it seems like every year he's missing, 4 to 6 plus games, is a worry for me, especially with, him being on a new team, having a young quarterback. I just don't know if they're going to be able to really keep him healthy. And outside of that, I don't know if you can really trust Wentz to be consistent on that deep ball. Like, and I hate to say it, Jay Cutler was in Chicago. I mean, say what you want about the guy. He fed Alshon and marshaled the ball like crazy. So, something to watch out for there. And the last one is kind of bouncing off that Kareem Hunt comment on Spencer Ware. I'm just not a fan at all of the pick. I think Spencer Ware is a serviceable running back from the standpoint that, he's reliable. He hits the hole, he picks up yards. But, outside of really just kind of being there in pass pro, I just don't see anything that Spencer Ware does that Kareem Hunt can't and do better. So I would say if you can get Ware and Hunt, maybe at a 6th and 8th round value, that would be positive. But outside of that, I would probably be looking to stash Hunt more than I would want Ware. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
a couple of guys that I'm looking at that are probably overvalued, not necessarily bust, but Martavis Bryant. I was looking at his numbers from the last couple of seasons and prior to 2016 being suspended. But he averaged only 7.4 yards a catch in 2015 and 4 yards a catch in 2014. Coming off of suspension, just something that he hasn't shown a lot. And if you're looking at drafting him in the 4th or 5th round, I'm not quite comfortable with the lack of production that he's had over that time. On the same token, Ben Roethlisberger, in the road games last year, he was absolutely atrocious. And so if you're going to draft a quarterback, I would think you want to draft a quarterback that you're going to only sub him out on the week that is his bye week. And if you're playing with Big Ben, you have to seriously consider sitting him in weeks that they're not playing at Heinz Field. And then one last one, just because I know there's a lot of talk, and I don't necessarily think he's going to have a bad season, but Martellus Bennett, going to Green Bay, when you have Aaron Rodgers, the prospects of a big season look bright, but outside of Jordy Nelson the last couple of years, they've been real inconsistent on a game-to-game basis on who gets the ball as that secondary receiver. And so just something to be wary of.
All right, and for me, I hate to say it. I know a lot of people are hyped on this guy. I'm steering clear of Fournette. Leonard Fournette, man, I don't like any Jaguars ever. I feel like it's just they build you up and then they let you down every time. Last year Allen Robinson, yeah, he's gonna be no. You know what? They screw you. You don't want to deal with that. I think one being in the Jags offense. I know they improved their defense a little bit, but they're still going to lose by 100 points every game. So they're going to be throwing the ball and they're going to be turning it over like crazy. That's why I'm steering clear running backs to the Jags. 2, there's a 3-headed monster over there. There's so many other running backs that are on the team. He might not even ever become the lead back this year. You never know. There's just too much risk associated with where he's being drafted. End of 2nd round, early 3rd, it's too high for me. I'm steering clear. And my other 2 going with wide receivers on new teams. 1, Brandon Cooks. And in that offense, the Pats offense, you want to bet on it, right? I mean, the 2 guys that have only ever been consistent are Gronk and Edelman. Brady loves throwing to those guys. He's going to keep throwing to them. Don't know how much is there for Cooks. My personal opinion, I don't think Cooks was ever that great of a player. I think Breeze made him better than what he was. And I don't know how many plays are going to be designed specifically for him in the Pats offense. They're going to use him a little bit, but I just don't think it's going to be enough to warrant drafting him. I think it's still just going to be Edelman, still going to be Gronk. That's it. And then the other one, Watkins. All I got to say about that is you don't want to ever draft the Rams receiver. Steer clear. Don't take him. Get out while you can.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't know. The Pats had this guy a few years back. His name was like Randy something, Randy Moss.
Are you comparing Randy Moss to Brandon Cooks right now?
Hey, I was just saying, he said the only consistent ones are Gronk and Edelman. So
one legendary season. Come on, Phil.
This guy just compared Moss to Cooks. Oh Jesus, Lord help me.
Just
Lordy.
saying. I don't know. I think Brady Cooks could have a decent role in that offense. I don't at his draft price. No way, not for me. But I think he's going to be frustrating. I think he's going to be kind of one of those guys like Edelman, where 1 week he's 40 yards and 3 catches. The next week he's 80 and 6. Or for Cooks it could easily be like 8 and 140 and 2 touchdowns. You just never know with the Pats. It's kind of like the running back situation. It's a total mess. So.
Yeah, but if Edelman has 40 yards, he's still going to have 8 catches, which is going to make it a viable week. Cooks is going to have 0 catches at least 5 games this season. Calling it.
5.
5 games.
Wow.
That's
5
Wow.
games.
That's bold.
He's gonna get 1 screen a game. He's guaranteed to catch a game.
Yeah.
It's going to Edelman.
Well, we have this on video, so we'll be able to refer back. Nice. So, all right. So let's move towards some current news. I know everyone hears all these stories out there in the NFL and kind of wants okay, well, this is going on. What is that? How does that impact fantasy? So obviously, the one that everyone knows about is Zeke. 6-game suspension coming down from not Roger Goodell, another NFL sanctioned suspension, but he was not involved in the decision-making process. How concerned are you with the suspension, and where are you guys drafting him?
I mean, the suspension is obviously a big deal. 6 games, that's half of your fantasy season. Now, if you're drafting this weekend, there's no appeal that's going to be made, or I shouldn't say that. The appeal has been made. There's no ruling on the appeal. That's going to happen if you're drafting this weekend and probably even next weekend. So you kind of got to go into it assuming it's going to be 6. Now, he could go the Tom Brady route and push it off through the courts, and you might not see him sit a game at all this year. Again, it's going to depend on your league size, where you're drafting. I might be inclined to take him coming back on the second round, in a 14-team league at 10. As far as if it goes down to 4 games, then it's just gravy. Obviously, you want to try to have Hillman or McFadden so that you can have some sort of production from the Cowboys backfield. And if Zeke's gone, clearly both of them will get work.
For me, it's really scary. You'd have to spend an early round pick on a guy that's going to miss half your fantasy season. For me, I don't want to go into a season knowing that my best player is not going to be there for half of it. It's going to happen to me anyway. They're going to get injured, but at least I have the hope that maybe they won't. And if your league's anything like my league, if you draft a guy that's going to be out 6 games, there are goddamn assholes that are going to overdraft his backup so that you can't get him. Just to spite you, and
Sam, I think you were that guy last year.
Present company excluded.
I saw an opening and I took it. All right, but hey, what goes around comes around, so I'm not going to put myself in that situation. But my advice, I would take the next best player available. I mean, over the course of a season, you got to assume that you're not going to get the backup. I mean, you can't count on that. And if he misses 6 games plus a bye week, that's 6 games without that production. And who knows how well the backup's going to do. I mean, what's going to be the next player available at that position, or at his spot, whether it's I don't know who. If you can get Devontae Freeman, whoever, they're going to outproduce him over the course of a season. I don't like the trade-off. I would steer clear just because you don't know what's going to happen. And hell, based on his track record, who knows if he's going to take off another chick shirt in the meantime during his suspension. So I'd steer clear of that.
Phil, did something happen to your mic?
Yeah, I thought you were talking. I can't hear you.
I was. My mute button got stuck. But yeah, I was gonna say I don't know how I feel about it necessarily. I obviously dropped him pretty low. He's 26 in my rankings. And flex rankings, but he's behind guys like Lamar Miller, Leonard Fournette, Todd Gurley, all guys that you can make arguments of why they're going to have terrible seasons. And that's just because, like you said, you're kind of baking in that fact that he's going to be missing about half your season if the 6-game suspension holds up. Not to mention, week 7 is their bye. You're not even getting, the luxury of it being an early bye and kind of floating one of those weeks. You're pretty much going to miss him for 7 weeks right off the bat, no matter what. That being said, if you want Ezekiel Elliott and you're not drafting in an industry experts draft, you better be grabbing him probably in that 14 to 17 range, because I'll tell you, everyone in that second round is going to be looking at him and really considering it. I think, really the people that are taking Ezekiel Elliott before that third, fourth round, the people that are really confident in their draft, and people that feel really good about those late round running backs. I personally feel really good about those mid to late round running backs because for some reason, I feel like there's a lot of depth. You can get the Seattle running backs right now with like a 7th and 8th round pick. I don't think you need to take McFadden. I actually would opt not to, just because at his 6th, he's going to be in a single digit round, probably somewhere from 6, 7, 8, based on kind of where all that settles. I just think that you could get a guy like I said, you could get Denver running back. You could get a Chiefs running back in the 6th to 8th round. You can get a Tampa Bay running back. You could even pair that with. I would not pair that with Martin, because then you're missing both guys for an extended period of time. But you could kind of mix and match based on how you feel at that point in the draft. I mean, to me, if like Devontae Freeman falls to me at 14 at the end of first round, I'm not taking Ezekiel Elliott. If a wide receiver slips to me and I feel really good about it, and just based on kind of how the draft is setting up, I'll think about it. But I think if you're getting Ezekiel Elliott before 20, I think you're really reaching. So I don't know. And like you said, there's a good chance by the time he comes back, he's gonna be done here.
I mean, the other thing to think of too is when you draft somebody like that, knowing that he's going to be out sometime, there's that possibility that somebody gets off to a really hot start in the league and looks to add, and you could require quite a haul week 5 for someone that's due back in 2 weeks. If somebody's 5-0, 4-1, and even into that next week. So it's just something to consider if you're confident to build a team that can hang around for those weeks that he's suspended.
Yeah, basically what I call Zeke at this point is the league winner. I mean, he's the type of guy that if you start off 4-1, 5-1, whatever, and the Zeke owner is 2-4, something like that, they might not necessarily be willing to say, okay, I'm going to take my lumps, or they might panic. We have people in our league like that. They draft Aaron Rodgers first overall, and then they get really antsy and trade away their whole team. But they're basically guys like that are going to have struggle at the beginning. You could easily pick up Zeke, or even if you do take Darren McFadden, say he slips a little bit, you could definitely trade him to the Zeke owner for or try to trade him to the Zeke owner for something that could potentially be valuable. Cool. So then next, I guess, piece of recent news, kind of on the same day as the whole Zeke suspension, but how does the Rams trade impact Sammy Watkins for
It hurts him. Jared Goff is quarterback.
you guys?
He's a Rams receiver. Steer clear.
Fair. I think it's the downgrade. It's definitely a downgrade. I think that with Tyrod, he definitely had that connection. They looked sharp in preseason. I mean, they were tearing it up. Um, Moving out to LA, it's definitely a bit of a crapshoot. I think he could potentially be a really good value, if he continues to fall in drafts. That being said, I think he's in that late 20s, early 30s range in terms of even positional value, just as wide receiver as a whole, because he was still the first wide receiver taken in a draft that included Odell Beckham. So I think talent wise, he's still there. I think he's still amazing. I think the Rams vastly improved their offensive line this year, which Jared Goff was the most pressured quarterback in 2016. So I don't think you can really anoint Carson Wentz without giving Jared Goff a chance to at least kind of see what he could do behind a decent offensive line, because Carson Wentz was pretty horrible once their tackle went out last year.
That's fair. I mean, until he shows he can throw the football though with any consistency, I'm staying away.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame him for not drafting. Conversely, Jordan Matthews going to the Bills. I know he's hurt right now, but healthy Jordan Matthews, best case scenario. What do you guys think?
Best case scenario, he's a wide receiver too. I don't think he drops too many easy catchable passes, and I just don't think he has that it factor that separates him into that top tier of wide receivers.
I agree completely. I don't think he's anything special. He does, like Anthony said, he drops a lot of passes. I had him in one of my leagues last year. He was frustrating to watch, but he's going to get targets. I don't think he's going to be terrible by any means, but I think he's going to probably be on the high end around 800 yards, maybe 5 to 7 touchdowns, but nothing to write home about, but nothing to scoff at either. I think he's in a better place than Philly for him. That's a little less, in your face, high volume. Maybe the settling down of the pace will help him out a little bit. Who knows?
Yeah. I think Zay Jones is going to be the guy to own in Buffalo. I don't see Jordan Matthews making much of an impact at all. I would say somewhere, if I had to guess, I would say between 650 and 750 yards. Maybe 4 to 5 touchdowns, 60 to 70 catches max. I just don't really believe in Jordan Matthews in that situation. The Bills definitely look like they're rebuilding. I think McCoy is probably going to catch 60 to 70 balls this year, something crazy. I think he could really have some huge upside. But yeah, I don't really believe in Jordan Matthews either. Next player, or next situation I want to talk about is Jay Cutler and the Miami Dolphins. How do you think that signing really impacts that whole situation?
I think it hurts Jarvis Landry. Jay Cutler's a gunslinger throwing the ball down the field all over the place. I think where Landry makes his money is the short dump offs, high yards after catch. I think it's going to help Ajayi. He's going to have a big season. They're going to run the ball a lot. I don't think they're going to win many games, but I think those two guys are going to be the most impacted on the team.
I don't know. See, Jay Cutler had his best statistical season when Adam Gase was his offensive coordinator in Chicago. So I think they easily could do different things with Jay's arm talent that they couldn't do with Tannehill, and that could change the way that Landry's used, both in the intermediate to deep game in addition to those screen passes. So I'm not completely sold that it hurts Landry. I do think they're going to run the ball, though, and so obviously that helps Ajayi.
Well, he doesn't have the conditioning to throw the ball more than 20 times a game. He's a quarterback. He doesn't need conditioning.
No, that was just he doesn't have to run up the field.
Well, either way, I mean, conditioning's conditioning, man. He's got to take a 3-step drop. Eventually, it's going to wear him down,
Yeah, that's fine.
He was retired.
Fine. He'll just sling it. That's all.
That's fair. I personally think, if you look at his time in Chicago, like you said, his best statistical season was with Adam Gase. Adam Gase is probably one of the best offensive minds in the entire NFL. I mean, the guy turned a terrible Miami team into, a playoff team, in under a full season. I mean, he's a phenomenal mind. I think, one thing that people forget, Jay Cutler is definitely a gunslinger. His one, I guess, issue has always been throwing interceptions. That being said, I guess with his time with Jay Cutler and working with him, his best season was actually his lowest air yards per attempt. So he was throwing the ball shorter, taking what the defense gave him, and really, I guess, kind of playing within the system, playing within the offense. I think, the guys on the outside, Kenny Stills, I think, this could help Devontae Parker. I don't know if I'm not sure what it does for Jarvis Landry. I don't think it hurts him significantly. But, if you look in the red zone, um, Alshon Jeffrey and Brandon Marshall were always phenomenal. Jay Cutler, especially in Adam Gase's offense, both over 1,000 yards, both like basically top 10 in the league in red zone targets. I think this could be potentially a boost to them because I think Jay Cutler is a better arm talent than Tannehill. I just don't know if I necessarily believe that he's going to really move the needle enough to shoot those guys up the rank.
I agree. I just don't think it's going to hurt him either.
Yeah, significantly at least. All right, so buy or sell. Wrote a bit of an article on this like a couple weeks back, but wanted to go through some of the things that are going on now and even some of the things that are a little bit older in the news department. But Le'Veon Bell's holdout. Is this a potential fantasy issue for you guys?
Potentially in a few weeks. Right now, no.
Yeah, I'm with Sam.
Yeah, he's still top 3 pick for sure.
He's training hard. That's not stopping him from working out in the offseason. His conditioning is going to be fine. I don't see his production getting any sort of decline early on in the season.
Yeah, I agree. I think to me the biggest change would be that normally I'd have Bell at 1, and I have him at 2. So David Johnson's an excellent player. I mean, you can't really. It's kind of a coin flip between the two. But it's just kind of that little bit of less confidence. I mean, it's kind of the case against him is starting to, or I guess, build up. I mean, he went from a guy that's been suspended numerous times to now hold out. It's just kind of like what's next for this guy. I mean, is he going to be the Deshaun Jackson that sits out half the season, or are they going to come to an agreement? I think they're either going to come to an agreement or Bell's going to end his holdout. I think it hurts him more than it helps him to get out these games, camp, I guess, as a whole. But I don't think it really moves the needle at all. I think it's still top 2
We're losing a little bit there. Your mic's not picking everything up.
Oh, okay. What parts did you miss?
It was just gets quiet sometimes. We're all right.
Oh, okay. I moved it back now. All right, we should be good. I guess the next buy or sell is are you guys buying that Danny Woodhead is the guy to own in Baltimore?
I'd say yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Especially in PPR. I mean, you look at what he did in San Diego, and with the Joe Flacco injury, they're going to rely on short passes in the flat, get the ball out of the quarterback's hands, and get it into the playmakers.
Yeah, I just don't know how good West is. I mean, he's all but stunk in Cleveland. He went to Baltimore and quote unquote revived his career, which more so unimpressive than anything. Every time you want to say Danny Woodhead isn't going to be the guy, he somehow weasels his way and ruins another player's offensive fantasy value.
Truth.
All right. Next one, Thomas Rawls. Right now, it sounds like all reports coming out of Seattle is that he's the lead back. He's working with the first team the most. And actually, in the one drive that Russell Wilson got in the first preseason game, Rawls was in there the entire time. Do you guys think he's the lead back in Seattle?
In title only, I guess. You don't bring in Eddie Lacy to not use Eddie Lacy, especially around the goal line. And so I think that's going to be a real timeshare, and it would have to be late round to get good value out of that pick.
I'm with Anthony. I mean,
you're a Seahawks running back hater.
Yeah, but last year Rawls was unimpressive to me. I mean, he had a couple good games, but at the end of the day, coaches weren't sold on him. I wasn't sold on him.
Don't forget they have pro size too.
What was that?
Don't forget they have pro size too.
Exactly. And he was by far the most impressive last year. But you don't go out and get a guy like Eddie Lacy and not use him. So I think they're just working on bringing Lacy back in shape a little bit. He's got to lose his keg he's got underneath his shirt there, but I think he's going to do well. I think Seattle's a really good place for Eddie Lacy. I think Green Bay wasted him a little bit. I think he's an extremely talented player. He runs kids over.
He didn't
He's
stay
going to be the
healthy
go-to
in Green
guy.
Bay though either.
He didn't stay healthy, but if he can get that under control, I think he'll be great.
I agree.
I think Seattle's a great place for him.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't know. I'm starting to buy into it a little bit more recently because I mean they love him in Seattle. He's been there for 3 years now, and every year it just seems like they have nothing but amazing things to say about him. That guy could fumble 6 times on a drive, and they would love it. That being said, like you said, I think Lacy is still the guy I'm drafting first. Rawls is close behind. The gap is definitely closing. But Eddie Lacy needs to be healthy before he can really make a determination on it because every time they say, Rawls is running with the first team, the next thing they say is, we need to get Eddie Lacy healthy. So, I don't think it's a cut and dry situation at this point, but I think the gap is starting to close, and Eddie Lacy could easily lose that job if he's not healthy and into the offense by come week 3, week 4 of the preseason. The last one, I guess, is kind of a polarizing figure. Mixon out of Cincinnati. I know from a social standpoint, which we won't cover, very controversial. But from the standpoint of, fantasy football and kind of where you see Mixon fitting into that mix with Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard, do you think, are you guys buying the hype?
I mean, I'm buying the hype that he's going to be a very good player. I just think right now Giovanni Bernard's the guy you want to own in a PPR league, and in standard leagues, I'm staying away completely. There's just too much talent at that running back position to warrant enough production for each one of them.
Yeah, I think he's a talented athlete for sure, but I wouldn't want him on my fantasy team. So, I mean, from a fantasy standpoint, I'd steer clear.
I am all in on Joe Mixon. I want Joe Mixon on every team I draft. I think he's going to have a monster year. I think if I had to say it right now, I think he's going to have the best season of any rookie running back. I think that if you look at Jeremy Hill, he's kind of the short yardage back, the plotter, the guy like LeGarrette Blount that's going to get that tough yardage and average 3 yards a carry. I think you look at Giovanni Bernard, he's a good pass catcher, but I mean, he can run the ball decently, but durability is an issue, and coming off an ACL, not the ideal situation. I think Mixon, I mean, you take a guy in the second round with that kind of baggage, you better, be ready to throw him into the fire because they're going to take criticism regardless. I just think Mixon has the type of talent to be an absolute difference maker. And, all the reports coming out is that he's been phenomenal. He's doing such a great job in camp. Granted, he is running behind Hill right now, but I think Hill might get the first carry. But I think Mixon's going to have a really big year. Then again, I am not a huge fan of any other rookie running back other than maybe Fournette a little bit, so I'm a little biased.
I'm personally a fan of McCaffrey. I think he's going to play a big role in that Panthers offense, and shorter throws for Cam, the better, because we all know that he can't really throw.
That's a fact. Well, but he's never, kind of to piggyback off that, he's never been a guy to throw the ball to his running backs. What's the most catches for a running back that they've had in that offense? Like 20?
Well, yeah, but look who they had catching balls out of the backfield.
Hey, you watch what you say about D'Angelo Williams.
Okay, yeah.
I had to ride that horse for a while with my Le'Veon Bell consistent picks. Awesome.
It is what it is.
Yeah, I can't do much about that. But all right, so kind of wrapping up here, getting towards the end. We have a draft coming up this weekend, a league that we'll be talking a lot about this year, and hopefully be able to get some of our additional members to join our conversation, join some of the fantasy talk, maybe even do some interviews. But with the draft coming up this weekend, AO League, I don't know. How do you guys feel about your picks?
I got 7. I mean, just to preface this, we like to establish our draft order a little bit in advance, in case that wasn't obvious with earlier comments made in the draft or in the show here. But yeah, I got 7th overall. I was feeling better about it before Zeke got hurt because I knew the top or not hurt, suspended. So I knew the exact 6 players that were going to be gone before me. Now it's a little mixed, but I feel like I'm targeting a certain running back that I plan on drafting, and I'm not upset about it. I feel like 7's okay, decent, right in the middle. Get a good swing pick on the way back round, so I'm content with my spot.
I've got 10, and I've after looking at the top 5 that we are assuming go 1 through 5. It appears that there are a second group of 5 players that I will be content with, whichever one's left over. So I feel like I'm in a good spot at 10, and then back at 18, we'll see what happens.
I'm at 14. I hate it. I absolutely hate my pick. I would trade with anyone, unless some crazy picks go down in the first round. I think if you just kind of go straight down the draft line, I am going to absolutely despise my first round pick. Even going by my own rankings, I would be taking T.Y. Hilton and Jordan Howard, and at that point, I would be looking to trade those guys instantly because I just would not feel comfortable with either of them as my first round pick. But Bill Mickelson really screwed me. I don't know who you guys.
Yes, we picked draft order based on golfers' scores during the British Open, and it was great.
That was terrible. It was a travesty. That was my idea.
That made it all the better.
So, pick number 5. Who are you taking?
Pick number 5.
That's Sam, right?
7.
Oh, Sam's got 7.
7? Pick number 7. Who are you taking?
Well, I hope some of the bastards in our league don't watch this and steal my pick, but I'm going to go with McCoy. I'm going to take LaShawn McCoy. I think he's got a lot of gas left in the tank. Fingers crossed. Anthony's cousin doesn't take him now.
Broken ankle.
Yeah, but that's my goal. If I don't get him, it's going to be a toss-up between Evans, Green, or Jordy. So.
Okay. Regal, who are you taking?
Well, based on conversations that we've had and looking at rankings, it looks like Melvin Gordon, and I'd be pretty happy with that. I also wouldn't mind having AJ Green or Jordy. So at 10, there's a little bit of wiggle room there. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I've seen, the more I've looked at it, I've actually seen Jordy going later and later and later. And I mean, I'm just looking at right here on Fantasy Pros, and Jordy's going 11. So, I mean,
Devontae Freeman, him at 13, yeah.
Devontae Freeman was going to be my pick at 14, but he's moved up some draft boards. Michael Thomas is moving up draft boards. So, I don't know. I think right now, if gun to my head at 14, just looking at who could be gone before me, it looks like I'm in that range of Jordan Howard, DeMarco Murray, T.Y. Hilton. I think I'd take DeMarco Murray. I have the turn, so I'm not even going to speculate on who else is going to be there because I just won't be happy about it.
Because you get everyone. You get the pick of the rest.
Yeah, at 14, I'm going to go Le'Veon Bell. Definitely Le'Veon Bell.
Good luck with that.
Thanks. I'm going to need it. Awesome. Well, that does wrap up our first episode of Make or Break Fantasy podcast / video / fantasy advice time. So I want to, first of all, thank you guys for making some time to, be here today. But, this is not going to be the only time we do this. That being said, we're going to try to do one a week. I don't know how, with schedules and everything, how realistic that is at this point. But we'll definitely be coming out with more fantasy content. To check out more of our stuff, follow us on Twitter at M or B Fantasy. And then online, you can check out our website at makeorbreakfantasy.wixsite.com. Definitely all different kinds of articles addressing some of the news that's out there now, as well as strategy. So come check that out. But yeah, for myself, Anthony, and Sam, really appreciate the views, and hopefully we helped you out today.
Thanks, Phil.